Think positive.
Welcome back to the Gulam Bros podcast, GA for short. I'm your host, Prince. This is a space for inner work, self-improvement, self-discovery, mindset, accountability, integrity, reflection, and personal development. This podcast is built for growth, for honesty, and for becoming a better version of yourself, one day at a time. New episodes drop every Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Today's episode is called Confide. Can I tell you my problems and you won't leave? Can I tell you everything without you looking at me differently? Can I tell you who I am and you won't judge me? Just see me from where I am. Do you have someone to confide in? If so, who's your person? Have you ever noticed we all have things we keep to ourselves, not because we want to, but because we're still trying to figure out if the person in front of us can handle it? Sometimes it isn't even something huge. Sometimes it's just a bad day that somehow became a bad week. Sometimes it's a thought you've been carrying around without ever saying it out loud. Sometimes it's a memory, it's regret, it's fear, and maybe it's simply wanting someone to understand where you're coming from. Not every thought is meant to stay trapped in our minds. Not every burden was meant to be carried alone. Yet, that's exactly what a lot of us do. We convince ourselves it's easier that way. Easier to smile, to say I'm good, to change the subject. Because once the conversation gets real, the questions start showing up. What if they don't understand? What if they look at me differently? What if they tell someone else? What if I become too much? So instead, we keep it to ourselves. We tell ourselves, I'll get over it. I'll deal with it later. It'll pass. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. But eventually, every person reaches a moment where they don't need another distraction. They just need someone to listen. I don't think people struggle to confide because they don't have anything to say. I think they struggle because they don't know what'll happen after they say it. It's easier to carry the weight than to risk someone dropping it. We've all had moments where we wanted to say something. The words were there, right at the edge of our lips, but they never came out. Not because we changed our minds, but because fear got there first. Fear has a way of finishing our sentences before we do. Don't say it. Keep that to yourself. They won't understand. You'll sound weak. And before we know it, we've talked ourselves out of being honest. Not with everybody, just with the people we wanted to trust the most. Maybe you've been there. You're sitting across from someone. They're asking, how have you been? And you could tell them the truth. You could tell them life hasn't been easy. You could tell them your mind's been heavy. Tell them you've been trying your best, and it still doesn't feel like enough. But instead, you smile, you nod your head, and you say, I've been all right. Sometimes I've been all right means I don't know if you're the right person to tell. That may be the hardest part. Not having something to say, not even finding the words, but wondering if they'll still see you the same after what you say to them. Because once someone knows something about you, there's no taking it back. They can't unknow it. And that can feel terrifying, especially if you've trusted the wrong people before. Maybe you've opened up and someone laughed. Maybe they brushed it off. Maybe they made your pain feel small. Perhaps they shared something you told them in confidence. Maybe they listened just long enough to respond instead of understand. Those moments stay with you long after the conversation ends. They make you question the next person and the next one after that, until eventually trust becomes something you protect instead of something you freely give. The truth is, not everyone deserves access to every part of you. Trust shouldn't be handed out carelessly, but it shouldn't be locked away forever either, because somewhere between telling everyone everything and telling no one anything is a place called wisdom, a place where trust is earned, a place where honesty can breathe, a place where you don't have to pretend. Maybe that's what we're all hoping to find. Not perfection, not someone with the perfect response, just someone who makes honesty feel safe. And maybe, before we ever ask, can I tell you something? We're really asking, can I trust you with a piece of me? Can I tell you something? You can tell me anything. That's the thing. People say that all the time. You can tell me anything. But when anything actually shows up, everything changes. Did something happen? A lot has happened. I just don't know where to start. Then don't worry about starting in the right place. Just start where you are. You ever hold something in for so long that you almost forgot how to talk about it? Yeah, that's where I am. I've replayed these thoughts over and over so many times that they've become louder in my head than they ever would be out loud. Then let them be out loud. I'm listening. I don't need you to solve anything. I don't need a speech. I don't need you to tell me everything's going to be okay. I just needed somewhere to put these thoughts besides my own mind. Then leave them here. You don't have to carry it all by yourself. You make it sound so easy. No, I know it isn't. That's why I'm not rushing you. I'm scared. Of what? That once you know, you'll see me differently. Different doesn't always mean worse. Maybe, but that's not how it always feels. Sometimes people only like the version of you that never struggles, the version that always smiles, the version that says, I'm good, even when they're not. Then don't be that version right now. What if I don't even recognize the version underneath? What if I've been pretending for so long? I don't know what's real anymore. Then maybe this conversation isn't about pretending anymore. Maybe it's about meeting yourself again. Can I ask you something? Of course. If I tell you everything, are you going to judge me? No. You answered that pretty fast. Because I already made that decision before you started talking. What decision? That I was going to understand before I tried to be understood. That I was going to listen before I responded. That I wasn't going anywhere just because the conversation became uncomfortable. You know, I wish more people were like that. Maybe they are. Maybe they've been just waiting for someone else to go first. Maybe. I think I forgot what it felt like to be heard, not answered, not corrected, not interrupted, just heard. Everybody deserves that. Thank you. For what? For making this feel safe. Uncomfortable. That's what's on the mind. What someone may have to say may be uncomfortable to hear, but that's where they are. That's where they're standing, or perhaps where they once stood. And sometimes the most uncomfortable conversations are the ones that need to happen the most. Not because they're easy, but because they're honest. You don't have to have every answer. You don't have to know exactly what to say. Sometimes the greatest thing you can offer someone is your willingness to stay, to listen, to understand, before you judge. I hope you found something worth taking with you today. Maybe a new perspective, maybe a moment to pause and reflect. Thank you for being here and sharing this space with me. Your presence matters. If this resonated with you, share it with someone you care about, because growth spreads through connection. I'll see you next time. Take care of yourself. Stay grounded. And as always, be safe.